Welcome everybody to the MiniMapCast. This is minimap.com.au's weekly games podcast, your favorite weekly games podcast. My name is Kerry Palmer, and I'm joined by Jeremy Ratatich.
Hello.
Hello, Jeremy.
Kerry.
This is important.
I'm
For weeks now.
I have an idea what this is going to be about.
For weeks. How do you already have an idea? You don't know.
You
don't know.
I'm pretty sure I know.
For weeks now, we've been following your exploits as you traverse Australia.
Yes, I do know what this
from
is.
hither and yon. And this whole time you haven't had a fridge.
It's very true. No, okay. The whole time it has been 1 month.
You've had one for 24 hours.
No, I know. But the whole time can mean, whole time doing the podcast, whole time it has been 1 month.
I said the last few weeks.
I know. I've not had a fridge for 1 month.
Yes.
And I've been occupying this dwelling for 1 month, but I've not been here for a month as I've been away.
No, I've been describing it every now and then when people ask about the website, and I'm like, oh yeah, Jeremy's doing all this stuff. I think I've said that you spent less time in your new place.
Yeah,
than most other places.
Yeah,
this last month.
There was a period of time where I had spent more time that fortnight in Sydney than I had in my new home.
Yeah.
More time in my hotel than I had in my new home.
Yeah.
But that is no longer the case.
So how have the last 24 hours been for you then?
Chilly. Good. I bought a bunch of perishables. A bunch of I bought some juice. I bought some oat milk. I bought a bunch of veggies, some yogurt, some cheese. Stuff you put in the fridge. And what did I do? Gosh darn it, I put it in the fridge. And then I came home from work today, and it was quite warm today. It was probably in the high 20s, probably 20, 26
close
or
to 30.
So.
Let's see what the phone says. But yeah, go on.
I picked up some more food on the way home, and put in the fridge. And then what I got out of the fridge, Kerry, was a cold can of Sprite.
Ooh.
Which I had put in there the night before. It's the stuff that you like, who doesn't do that? Except for the fact I haven't been able to. So it's been really nice to have a nice, refreshing beverage. I haven't drunk juice in a month because I haven't had anywhere to keep it. I've been buying a juice every now and again,
Yeah, but you can't keep a 2-liter bottle because it's fruit juice.
Yeah, right? So yeah, it's nice to be able to not have to think about what I need to cook or ingredients that I need to buy and what I can and can't cook because I won't be able to keep the ingredients good enough.
Yep.
And it's been good to just be able to have it there.
Yeah, totally. I'm very excited for you, Jeremy. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You finally moved in.
Yeah. I then had to run to the Bunnings because where the power outlet is in the fridge cavity is not in the right spot very well, and so the fridge doesn't go in all the way. So I had to I went over to Bunnings and bought a 1 meter extension cable just because it had a flat
the flat plug.
Yeah, so I bought, and that gave me a little bit more headroom, which is good.
You're not going to stub your toe on your fridge as often now.
No. And then I also picked up some additional desk working materials, some paint and some sanding and some gap filler for the soon to be used set.
Yes, the set.
Yeah,
the fabled set.
Yeah.
One day we'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for the record, is that what you thought I was going to talk about?
Yes.
How did you know? You didn't know.
You're not that. I know you. is what I mean by that.
You're not slick. You're not sly. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. If you weren't aware, this is a games podcast.
Yes.
Not that you'd know from the start of it, but we're going to talk about games for the rest of the shows. Thank you for joining us. This is the MiniMapCast, minimap.com.au's weekly games podcast. Every week, We go live on all podcast platforms every Wednesday with 24 hours of early access given to all of our wonderful patrons. More on that in just a second. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you tell your friends, give the show a positive rating wherever you listen to us. It helps out a huge amount with the show, and it only takes a couple of seconds. If you want to get notified every time a new episode is released, you can follow us on the social media accounts. It's at MiniMapAU on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and also Twitch, where we are live every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time for the live recording of the MiniMapCast. We're also on Blue Sky at minimap.com.au.
That's the one.
Yeah, which is like the website.
Same as the website.
Put the website into Blue Sky and you'll get our Blue Sky account and not the website. It's weird.
Yep.
We wanted to say thank you to Shook for letting us use the Moog Model D Improv as the music for the MiniMapCast. You can listen to more of Shook's music at shook.bandcamp.com. Did you get your records, Jeremy? Did they all arrive?
I gotta find one.
Yeah, because the one was being sent while you were moving, right? So you don't know if it went to your old place.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm in the process of figuring out what I need to do next.
Yeah,
it might have just been like sent back.
Hopefully,
which is fine.
Yeah. And finally, MiniMap is completely independent and funded almost entirely out of our own pockets. So if you'd like to help us keep the mics and lights on, you could do that by becoming one of our patrons. For only $5 a month, you get 24 hours of early access for all episodes of the MiniMapCast, some extra bonus features we're cooking up, and more. Those extra bonus features will be using the fabled set, which you can see part of behind Jeremy's shoulder right now if you're watching the video. So yeah, you can find that over on patreon.com/MiniMapAU to help us out. And remember, it's cheaper than a latte with oat milk. It's also cheaper than a fridge.
Much cheaper.
You know, even if it's been years, it's still cheaper than a fridge.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Jeremy, I don't know that we spoke about this prior to starting the show, but I was thinking maybe we do a bit of what I've been playing this week, and then we'll get into the topic of the week. We'll sort of get that smaller one out of the way, and then get into the meaty subject.
Sure.
Because we've got a big topic this week. There was a heavy number of layoffs that happened at Bungie this week, so we'll be getting into that, as well as some extra research Jeremy's been doing into the state of the industry this year, sort of as the Bungie moment serving as a bit of a catalyzer for us to take stock of what this year has been for the industry, and we're gonna go into it all.
If you like hearing me get angry, then you're in for a treat.
Yeah, great. Buckle in, everybody. But before we get to that, I'm here to update you all on my time with Alan Wake 2. It's not going to be a long update because I honestly don't think I've played. I've played about 10 hours, I think, but I think I've played it very slowly. Like, I think I might be a third of the way through the game. Maybe I hope it's not less than a third. Because that is going to be a 40-hour game at this rate.
Some people it was.
Oh, that's dire. That's dire to hear. I don't want to play Alan Wake 2 for 40 hours. But I have been playing it for 10. I can tell you my thoughts about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you weren't aware, Alan Wake 2 is another game where you play as two protagonists, which we've had like 6 of those in the last 3 years of big budget games that do that. You play as an FBI agent, Saga Anderson, who says her name like an Australian every time, and it like she doesn't say it like funnily enough, Australian actor Hugo Weaving in The Matrix, where he goes, Mr. Anderson. You know, he gets the R on the Ander, you know.
Right.
Saga says Anderson.
Oh, right.
Like I say it, like a flat R, Anderson.
I do wonder if that's like that area like of Europe thing, right? Like it might.
They're in America though.
Yeah, I know, but like you know, like how there's an Americanism in some pronunciations of some words when people from Europe speak in English. I wonder if it's one of those things. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
Yeah.
It's the only word I catch. Every
Yeah,
time she introduces herself, I'm like, what? And then the rest of it's just a fine American accent.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, so play half the game as Saga Anderson. You play the other half of the game as Alan Wake. It's a very fascinating push and pull. It allows them to explore, like Saga sort of plays in like the real world in a very similar way to, I think, the first Alan Wake game.
Really quick, Melanie Libbard, who is the actor for Saga, she's British.
Oh, okay. Okay, okay.
There you go.
Well, she does a great American accent, except for when she says Anderson.
Yeah,
so
right.
Great. And then the other half of the time you play as Alan Wake, you are in the dark place and you're trying to remember what happened. And it's a very fuzzy, ethereal, intangible, dreamlike place. So what the reason I say all of that with that preamble is to say that I've done the big first Saga section of the game. I've done the next big Alan Wake section of the game, and finishing up that first Alan Wake section, you get to a point where you can now swap back and forth between Saga and Alan at will, meaning you can play along as far as you want with Saga until you get like stuck, and then you need to go back to Alan's recollection to sort of piece together what you need to do, or you can do like chapter by chapter. You could trade off or whatever, but I only just got to the point where you can do that. I'm split on my opinion with this game, and I said something to you earlier in the week, and I messaged, and I was talking to our friends, and I was like, oh yeah, no, everyone's really liking Alan Wake. That's why I got into it, and like I don't love it.
It's so funny.
And it's that thing where I'm like, oh no, is it me? Am I the problem? Or is everyone else wrong? Am I wrong? Like,
no,
my
wrong.
faith has been shattered.
But it's like it's funny how you're like this with, like, I want to say, like, at least the Remedy games you've played.
That's a good point, because Control I never really dug.
Yeah, but you're also like this. It's like I kind of akin this almost to how you feel about what's the name of the studio? Arcane's games.
Yeah.
Like
like when I played Deathloop and I like just like hate the input, the way they handle like controller inputs in that game. I'm like,
and it's like critically adored for the most part. Like, like, and also like similar occupying similar space in the industry where they've been doing a thing for for 20 years, and they're like really darlings. Good at that. They're one thing. And they've got their fans who have been and will be their fans for basically like forever.
Yeah, and they've had a couple of games that have spoken a bit louder to the general audience recently. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Deathloop's a really a pertinent example, I think. Not Redfall, but
no. I'm discounting Redfall in that, but I mean, like, between those and Prey and Dishonored.
Yep. I don't know what they did before that, but yeah, all them ones.
Working on Valve games.
Oh, were they?
Yeah, they were going to make the third Half-Life.
Oh,
you should watch that documentary. Their no clip is fucking incredible. Like, they showed that.
Arcane.
Yeah.
Okay.
They show what that is, their version of what episode 3 was going to be, because by that point,
really cool.
like, everything had been done and their contracts were up, and they owned what they had made, and so
so they could show it, right?
Yeah, it's called. It's not Black Mesa, but I want to say it's got the word black in the name. But it's also a rite of passage where when you join Arcane, they make you play through that. Just like prior to like getting started as like here's what we're about sort of thing.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
I've been having a weird feeling about it. I jumped into a Discord, or like a Discord that I'm in, and people have been talking about Alan Wake in one of the channels there, and I had a big whinge one night after I was failing in an encounter a lot. I whinged.
And you woke up and the Discord was gone from your list and you'd been banned.
Well, no, it was funny because I got to it the next day and I wasn't having the same issues, and I was just like, okay, I just needed to whine about this a little bit.
Yeah, right.
But the thing that made me whinge, the thing that I'm finding the most friction with is the combat. I don't love it, and not from, I think, like it's not an Arcane thing. I think the input's fine. I can aim fine, whatever. But there's the first boss fight you do is like 4 or 5 hours in, but it's like your third total combat encounter in the entire game, and the other ones are really fast. And then all of a sudden I'm in this like 5-minute boss fight. I died there like over and over and over, and it was boring, and I didn't know what I was necessarily doing wrong, because it was giving me a like, you've played this game for 4 or 5 hours boss. But again, I'd probably only done like 3 minutes of combat in the entire game prior to that. So that was really aggravating. And not long after that, I unlocked the Alan Wake sections. There were also some wolf enemies that you fight as Saga that I just didn't enjoy. I just didn't understand like the rules of the game really.
Right.
Like, but I thought that I did, but like it just wasn't feeling good. It was like, okay, this wolf's shrouded in shadow, so I need to blast it with my light. I need to do a burst or whatever they call it, focus. And it like falls over, and I'm like, okay, well, it was keeping its distance because it's like a wolf or whatever. So it didn't feel the full effect of the light. And when I shoot it, it doesn't do as much damage because I'm not as close. So I run out of like all of my ammo, and then it kills me. I'm like, okay, what the fuck happened? I thought I did the thing. I blast it, I shoot it. And I start again. I'm like, maybe I need to blast it more up close. And I blast it and it like falls back out of range, and I can't shoot it again. Or I try to get close and it tackles me to the ground because it like charges you. By the time it gets close, it charges you and you can't blast it out of its charge. And I'm like, oh, fucking hell. Like dying on this like one enemy. Like, so that was frustrating. And then as Alan, here's the enemies that he fights in this dream world. They're like specters. They're like black silhouettes, and they speak with like this otherworldly presence, and they say like vaguely confusing and confronting things because they're like manifestations of the dark presence or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they're all like, every time there's one near you, it's like, Alan. It's like, whoa, and you focus on it. If you get close to it and you're pointing your light at it, but you're not like bursting it, you're not charging it, then they can like dissipate and like fade away and warp back out of reality. And that like saves your battery in your flashlight. But like 1 in every 10 of those phantoms is one that you need to burst down, which like breaks its shield and reveals it to be a more corporeal but still dreamlike enemy. And they've got like an axe or a pipe. They're just miscellaneous human colors and shape. The thing with them is that you never know when they are or are not going to be real, especially if you're doing what I'm doing, which is getting close to them with the flashlight and not using battery power. So to see whether they warp away. So every now and then I get up close to them and then it's real and they fucking hit me for a third of my health out of nowhere. Also, they warp towards you. Like they zip zap zoop, and they're there. They're right in front of you.
Yeah.
They could take more than a full like revolver cartridge into their body. You have to try and hit them in the head. But if you wait to try and get the headshot, oftentimes that's enough time for them to start teleporting towards you. You can only take like 3 hits, and they have like 3 hit combos. So if you get hit by the first one, you can get comboed. And so I was just finding myself, I'd hit random normal encounters with like just 2 guys, and I'd die over and over and over. And again, not so much the second night after I whined about it. Well, I don't know what that's about. But when I was getting
Dark Souls ass logic of like, this boss is so difficult, what the hell? And you come back the next day, like, I beat it the first try.
Yeah. It's exactly that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I could interface with it a bit more. And I can just bump it down to story. It has difficulty modes, and like if it gets on my nerves, I will be doing that. Like I have been annoyed with this game enough to the point where I'm like, I'm not going to fuss over it anymore after this. It's just going to happen. Anyway, all that being said, is it's a bit of a stumbling block on what has been quite an excellent storytelling survival horror experience. They're doing so many cool things in this game. A lot of great like multiple world stuff, or maybe not even multiple worlds, but there's this thing that Alan does where you can like take a light source from somewhere and place it in another one, and it completely redefines the area. Like walls open, like walls that were there cease to be, and then you can walk through when you either remove or add the light, and it changes different things. You can give yourself a safe zone from the darkness enemies, and it's quite technically impressive. It's quite visually impressive. The warping visual effects of the phantoms in the dark place is honestly really stunning, because it's within this. It's a very convincing photoreal effect inside this photoreal world, but it's so uncanny. It's so paranormal. It's so unusual. It's a really nice fine line that they've walked there. So yeah, I don't know if I'm in love with the story so far. It's all a bit it feels a bit up its own butt, because it's all about writing and you're reading these passages, and the passages define what's going on in front of you, and then you like change the thing, and it's being edited by someone else maybe, and it's like all this kind of stuff, and it's part of the artifice of what the game is. But it means that the writing that you're hearing in the game as part of the game world sometimes feels a bit trite and pretentious.
Right.
But it is serving the story in that way. So it's not bad necessarily. Just sometimes I'm like, Alan, I don't need to hear you wax poetic about the rain in fucking fake New York anymore. That's enough.
It's funny. I remember like one of the, like a very funny and like fair criticism of I think Alan Wake 1 and 2 is that, you know, the image of the guy screaming like, I know writers use subtext and they're cowards.
Yeah.
And it's like they've taken that image, like that joke.
Yeah.
And they wholeheartedly agree with it. Like the game is not subtle. And
no,
Alan Wake 1 is also not subtle.
It's trying to make you think it's like deep writing, but really it's the surface level of the plot. It is the plot.
Yeah. And I think it's like it both treats it as deep, but also treats it as like over the top and ridiculous. Like it can toe that line. Control was a lot more not subtle, but like a little bit more subdued with how it was handling some of the like the narrative and its themes, where things were sort of coming a little bit more naturalistically, whereas Alan Wake is like this, like it's and like this has been said to death, but it's the same as a lot of like that Twin Peaks feeling thing, where like we're just gonna like lean really hard into metaphor to the point where like it's just not even metaphor. Well, like anymore. it's just overt, or like to an extent. Which is like fun. I think it's fun. It depends on, I think, a little bit of what you're in the mood for. Because sometimes if you're not in the mood for like, you know, like man saying I am sad and then it rains, then that can be a little bit like, okay, I get it, even though the game knows that you get it and is leaning. So if you're not in the mood for
it's just the kind of thing where I'm sitting there and I'm like, another sentence start of like, Alan looked into the subway and he saw the subway car was closed. He had to find some way around it. It's like, all right, guys.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
There was something in the darkness, the dark place. It's like, yes, I know.
and while that's like corny, like I think I still prefer that than a lot of other like because the other side of that, right, is the stuff that's like a most recent example for me was Spider-Man 2, which is like Peter walking around monologuing to himself about items that he's picking up and being like, oh yeah, I remember this holiday that I had with Aunt May when I was 7. Man, those were the days. And then like putting it down. I'm sitting here like, this sucks. Only because like that's not giving me almost anything. Like that gives me like you saying that gives me the exact same amount as me picking this up and then him looking at it and putting it down. Like I don't need the dialogue.
You're watching someone experience a memory.
Yeah, well, I'm listening to someone tell me the memory that they are also showing me. When you can just show it to me, it's fine.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily even like a like something that would like take away points from it if I was reviewing it kind of thing. It's just, you know, at a point it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to go be Saga for a moment now.
Sure.
So yeah, it's been funny doing that. I said something similar to this last week where I said I absolutely love that Max Payne's voice actor is in this, and it just seems to be like on call for Remedy and will be in any Remedy project.
Yeah.
He's got a different role in this game inside of Alan Wake's universe, because in Saga's experience, Alex Casey is a real person.
Yeah.
Who happens to look and sound exactly like the manifestation of Alex Casey in The Dark Place for Alan, who is the character of his best-selling detective series called Alex Casey. And so then he gets to do all of that Max Payne dark poetic nonsense speak in The Dark Place that like Alan finds clues that he was there, and that deep, gravelly, gruff voice talking absolute poetry that goes nowhere. It's so circuitous. I'm like, I could listen to that all day.
Yeah.
All day. And I'm so glad it's there. And then you come back out to like reality with Saga, and he just talks like a normal person with that voice. And it's like, oh, this is really, really fun and different. And I'm really enjoying it.
The he's in control as well.
Yeah. He's the previous head of the bureau.
Yeah.
I think he works well in this role, because like the thing I knew him best from before this was Max Payne 3.
Sure.
I played 1 and 2, but like it wasn't the same performance. In 3, he's so like depressed and dysfunctional and not happy and bad. Like, and it's such a great performance from him in that game. And to feel that similar but different vibe here is very fun. It's very good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's my Alan Wake vibes. I'm excited to get more into it, but yeah, it's not the thing I jump to every night to play. You know, I'm thinking about it, but I'm also like, that friction has kept me from like playing it every night, I guess.
Right.
So that's it for what we've been playing.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy's been playing some stuff, but nothing groundbreaking, nothing we haven't spoken about already.
Yeah, well, like I've played like I started Juzon last night, but
cool.
Like I haven't gone up to where I got up to in the demo yet, because the demo was just the first like chunk of the game. But from my understanding is that it's like a 4-hour game, so I'll probably beat it between now and next week.
Oh, is it only that long? That is very good to know.
And yeah, it's only that long, and it's on Game Pass. So like it's just real easy for me to just jump in and do it. But yeah, like I said, I've only basically got my demo experience for that so far.
Yep. And you've also been playing more Mario, but we've done a whole thing on Mario.
Yeah. Like I'm real close to the end on that. Like I've got about a world left. Still fucking adore it. I think you should keep playing it. I know that like.
Oh, I'm not. I haven't decided to put it down. You know, it's just the kind of thing of like, oh my I don't know what's happening on my screen. It's normal on Discord, but it's not normal in OBS. It's I have it's kind of the Skyrim thing, right? I haven't decided to put it down and not come back. I just have put it down and haven't gone back yet.
So like
I fully intend to go back.
Like I definitely recommend getting to like World 3 and 4, because it like there's a little bit more freedom with what you can do. You get to like once you finish World 4, World 5, 6, and 7, they let you choose which one you want to go to at any point. So you can just like do a little bit here, do a little bit there, and like so there's a little bit more immediate variety. Like, oh, I don't want to do this world right now. I'm just gonna go do the other one.
No, but I wasn't finding that. I was just like, at some point I was just over playing a 2D Mario game.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I was like, I want to do something else. Like the last time I was playing it, I was enjoying it. Like I beat the second world. I'll get back to it. So that brings us neatly.
Yeah.
To, I would say, a news item that dominated the news cycle and the industry last week, which is mass layoffs at Bungie. Now you've been preparing for this topic during the day, so I'll let you sort of steer the ship here. But I figured maybe we talk about Bungie a bit, have a break, and then talk about like the wider industry afterward.
Yeah,
cool. All right. Well, take it away, Jeremy. What have you got for us?
So Bungie experienced Bungie, the company, the leadership at Bungie has made the decision to lay off close to 100 people. It was really messy. So Bungie as a company missed their targeted financials.
Their projections.
Making something of only 45% of what they expected to make. Is the understanding that we have that is where they expected to be and where they hit was very, very far apart. So they had to immediately last week lay off 100 people over a few days. And there have been reports from people like Schreier over at Bloomberg, thank you. And same with Tassie as well at Forbes, that on top of this, they've also delayed both the final shape, which is going to be the final expansion for Destiny 2. And
they haven't said it's going to be the final expansion. They said it's the final part of the story for their current Destiny saga.
It's going to be the final expansion. They haven't said...
It is looking more and more now that it is that. But before this all came down, it was not meant to be the final bit of Destiny content.
I think it probably would have been. I think
it's not what they've been saying. They've specifically said there will be more stuff afterwards.
In Destiny 2 or just more Destiny?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, I think that was very bold of them to consider, especially considering the name of that expansion.
Yeah, they said it's the end of the current story and there will be more afterwards.
Right. So that expansion and also Marathon, their next big project,
their extraction shooter.
Yes. They have both. There are reports out there that they are being delayed. There has still been no word on if it has been delayed. They have not officially said it, which is wild considering that everybody else has.
Well, yeah, and it's like it was the same reports that Schreier and Tassie were getting from their sources and from like Twitter of people saying I'm getting fired and also the final shape has been delayed. And like people were definitely fired and they haven't confirmed the delays. And it's like, well, we know one of these is true and they went hand in hand.
Yeah, like I'm not saying those people who have said that they will let go have also announced that they are being delayed, that the things are being delayed. I don't think they said that outwardly. That delay is probably going to be coming soon. So the way this was done was absolutely fucking dreadful across the board. People were being there was 2 days of layoffs.
Yeah.
At least. Bungie hadn't put out a statement until 4 days later. It was
the CEO had tweeted prior, hadn't they? Pete Parsons had said shit on Twitter about how we have the right people to make Destiny something.
Yeah, we now have the right employees working on the project, and also calling Bungie a family, which is if a CEO, if a boss ever says we're like a family, run, because that is code for we are going to use your feelings towards people that you have here to make you feel like you're obliged to do work that you might not necessarily be paid for.
And we know that that's the culture that they cultivate over there at Bungie, of it being a family.
Yes. And it's a thing that a lot of companies, a lot of workplaces say. And it's a very easy way to try and bring camaraderie to people. But it always does it in a way that definitely benefits the company and very rarely benefits the actual employees themselves. So I think it's worth pointing out your workplace is not your family and it never will be. Bungie's decision to do all of this and then not put out a statement for quite a while, and also have your CEO just be tweeting and have your statement be some of the most hideous PR speak while people have lost their jobs. The whole thing is shit. And all of this, it comes from their projections. You've muted yourself.
Oh, I have to. I was saying, Sorry, I said it so clearly. I was like, layoffs are always bad, but this was particularly bad, is what I said.
Totally. The layoffs in this case were due to the fact that the leadership at a company like Bungie completely fucked up their projections. They made when you have projections like this, like hitting 45% of your projections is so bad, and the buck needs to stop with the people at the top when it comes to stuff like this, because you fucked up at that point. None of the people working there who were just employees were the ones that fucked up. It's not like that they didn't work hard enough or work well enough to make the company hit 45%. When you're hitting 45%, when you're missing your target and only hitting 45% of that target, then that's a failure of the fucking target to not understand where you're actually going to be by the end of the quarter or year or reporting period. Bungie know what bad years look like. They've had bad years in the past. The most recent expansion obviously didn't hit very well. And they've been not getting as many players into the game as they want. I don't think that they have increased
with each subsequent season.
Totally. The seasons following Lightfall, and Lightfall itself weren't great, but you don't then point to that and then say we'd only hit 45% of our target, and now we've got the right people working on the project. It is just like so fucking rude. And on top of that, Marathon has to be pushed back by a year now, and everything we've heard about the internals of that game and how it's been received have been really bad.
Right.
Yeah, like as in like something along the lines of like, this is a really bad like game mode. I'll try and pull it up, but like, yeah, things are not looking good over there.
I did hear a bit of scuttlebutt as this was breaking. It's been so piecemeal. So like, Tassie tweeting something about something he heard on one day, and so this isn't necessarily fact. But something I did hear was these projections were partly made. It seemed to have been made to like impress or like appease Sony like ahead of time. So they came in with super, super bullish projections just to like look impressive.
Yeah. And to get bought, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, theoretically, these projections should have happened after they were bought, because it was when they were bought around the time Witch Queen came out. So it was they were under Sony for an entire year before Lightfall came out. They should have.
Well, I don't think it's 1-to-1, because I think it was like intent to buy, and then when they're actually bought is later, right? There was like 6 or 8.
That's true.
There was like 6 or 8 months while that was happening, because it was happening at the same time the trial was going on.
Finalized in July. You're right, yeah. But still, that's if they were talking about it in Feb and it finalized in July, that's through to February. That's more than half a year. So I guess those projections could have been done ahead of time, but still, especially when part of the acquisition money was especially lined out to make sure that they didn't have to have any redundancies within the company. Like that's what part of the buyout was for, and like to help with employee retention.
And on top of that, they've let go of people like their entire composing team. From my understanding is like the 2 main composers. One of them that has been there for like 15 years or something
since Halo.
Is now gone. Liana,
and he's done excellent stuff. Excellent soundtrack. Some of the best in games every time.
Liana Rupert, who was one of the community managers and sort of the face of the community of that game, was also let go. And so now there's a tremendous amount of player trust that has been deteriorated at the same time. Mm-hmm. The sentiment around the game, just like online on social media, has pitfalled, considering that now everyone's going like, well, it's now been pushed back, and also you're like hemorrhaging. Well, like you're laying off a bunch of staff, and so like I don't really feel excited about this anymore. And so there was an article that came out of Windows Central called "Destiny 2 Streamer Says Bungie Held a Marathon Gameplay Summit for FPS Players, but nobody was interested." Reportedly, no one raised their hand when asked if they'd play Marathon if it came out tomorrow. A second trusted content creator source who also attended the summit said nobody raised a hand because Marathon was still in pre-alpha state and the Bungie emphasized the game was still years away. Things are not looking well.
Yeah.
And one of the things that there was an expectation, and perhaps this was misplaced trust, but there was an expectation that when a larger company comes in to purchase a company the size of Bungie, there's a bit more capital to play with.
Yes, and a bit more support potentially.
And I'm not putting the immediate blame on this on Sony because it's too early for them to get involved in this.
Yeah.
I don't believe that they came in and suddenly put unrealistic expectations on Bungie because that's not quite how things work. And they must have an understanding of how studios like that work and games like that work. And a comparison to be made is when Microsoft bought Bethesda, for example, or even like some of the studios around it. It's not like they came through and then suddenly had to lay off 8% of their workforce because they weren't hitting a target. Understanding around some of that is that they said to this, like that the higher ups of Microsoft said to those studios saying like, what game do you want to make? And we'll put some money into that so you can make that thing.
Yeah.
This is like not the opposite because this isn't Sony saying you need to lay off like 100 people.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's not even, it doesn't even seem to be a Sony directive that this has happened.
Yeah, this seems to like lay firmly at Bungie's feet.
Yeah.
And for a studio that has had some rough times over the past years in terms of like them putting out content that has been liked but not loved, or perhaps not quite as much as what people want, or not in the way that people want. Like, I don't know who looks at the final shape and goes like, I'm thrilled by the idea of this.
Mm-hmm.
It's, and what do they do between now and then? They have to, like they've said they're going to extend out a season, is my understanding. And the season's going to be longer. And so there's going to be less things to do in there because it's now going to take longer because they have like 100 less people working on it overall. And so it's not going to be as exciting. Like, what the fuck is the plan here?
Yeah, I've also seen some things about people talking about what the final shape is, what they want it to be for Destiny, inside of Bungie, and they said that they want it to be a bigger moment than like the Taken King or Forsaken was for Destiny 1 and Destiny 2. The thing with those expansions was they were excellent stories, but they were also the culmination of a year of iteration to help perfect what the game was after the 1.0 version of each of those games launched, and so
underwhelming launches, we'll say.
Yeah, of both of them being underwhelming launches, and they both were watershed moments of now Destiny's good. Now Destiny 2 is good. Not only is it good, but it's great.
Yeah.
And that's what those moments are. Now they've been spinning their tires with yearly content, or sometimes a bit more than a year because of delays. For a while now. They've been trying to keep up this cadence. And so maybe they can have this turnaround of like, oh, Lightfall wasn't so good, but now Destiny 2 is good to play again. Like they can come back around on that. But the thing is, it's full of so much baggage. Like when I think of Destiny 2 now, it's full of very complex feelings. And I know it's the same for you. I know you have complex feelings about it because of their content vaulting and all of that. Like you can't play the full game anymore. And so it's just, it seems almost impossible for the amount of baggage to be overcome inside of Destiny 2. And it's funny, when I hear this news, as you said, the news came out and it really tanked player sentiment. And I was just trying to think about how it hit me when it came out. And it takes my normal feelings with Destiny 2 of, oh, I'm not in it right now, but I'll come back at some point, to, oh, there's a problem here. Like there's a certain amount of faith in the company on one side of that and a complete lack of faith afterwards. And I imagine that's where a lot of the community is at. Like it's with a game this big that we've been playing for so long, it's okay to leave it every now and then, especially when this year is so packed as it is. But for whatever reason, it's clear now, well, not for whatever reason, because of these layoffs, it's clear now that not only are people falling away because maybe it's a down year or it's a busy time, but it's also there's problems going on here. There are deep systemic issues with how they are running their business, how they are running the game, and how they want to move forward. And
like they had, like, before these layoffs, my understanding is that the size of the company was around 1,200 people.
Huge.
Yeah, that's a lot of fucking people. They also opened a brand spanking new HQ office, huge building, wonderful, exciting new building for them.
Expensive new building,
while also encouraging, rightfully so, employees to work from home if they want. Because, you know, we've learned how to do that now.
Yeah.
It's exciting to have an office. I get that. It's exciting to work in an office. I personally enjoy working in an office and working in a collaborative space. Not everyone does, and not everyone needs to.
And also they have one. It's not like they don't still have an office. They still have an office.
Yeah, and like, I don't know what, you know, like, things can change. You know, maybe they had to get out of that office, or maybe the rent got increased and there was too much for them to you know, there's reasons why they might have had to move to a different place, but they moved to like a big spot.
That they built, right? They funded.
I think, I'm not 100% sure on those details.
That was the impression I got.
Right. Like, on top of all of that, the way they've been working content is awkward and difficult for a company that size, in the size of content that they want to make, right? You know, them doing an expansion and 3 seasons of content per year is... Or four is them putting... Sorry, that's right, because a season of content always comes with the launch of an expansion as well. You know, it's them forever putting the tracks before the train as it's going in that like Wallace and Gromit thinger, right?
Yeah.
You eventually run out of track because that kind of stuff is not sustainable, really. We've even seen, you know, a company the size of Fortnite scale that back at times when...
You mean Epic?
Well, yeah, well, like Epic Fortnite specifically, like when they sort of cut that chapter short at one point to do the Unreal 5.1 upgrade to Fortnite, there was a feeling of like there was probably content here that was planned and content that was teased that then got rapidly thrown, like smooshed together to then make way for this new thing, because it probably made the development faster at that point as well, because they're always building new tools. So like there was a technical reason for it, and it's why that chapter felt awkward, but they had to do that because even Epic Games couldn't keep that up at that point. The idea that Bungie were going to be able to continuously do this at the same scale and the same quality is impossible, and hit the same financial targets.
And you have to remember as well that when they started making this game, after they left Microsoft in like 2011, 2012, they were with Activision. They were being bankrolled by an even bigger studio that gave them development support alongside that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't working for them because they had different priorities or whatever. And they have said in the past that, you know, they're not going to be able to operate at the same pace that they did when they started, because they just don't have that same juice anymore, that Activision juice. It's fine. And that's fine. I think the player base has been quite accepting of that. And they've grown to accept... We've had so many expansions outside of the Activision pipeline now. Like, players know what that means for Destiny, and that has been accepted and integrated, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But you're right. Laying down the track as the train is rolling, it's what they've been doing ever since the first game released in 2014. And it was subpar, and they didn't know what they were doing with seasons. They were paid expansions. Like, they were like sub expansions, and then there was the Taken King, and like they've been iterating and experimenting and testing, and nothing's ever landed. It's always had to continue to iterate, continue to get better, continue to falter, continue to try and change and do more and do better. all at the same time. And it has meant that there has been no rest, for one thing. And also, there's been no stability in the game.
Kind of like they've had pockets of it, and they've had like moments where everything looks like it was going in the right direction, right? There were moments where they would have, like a big produced moment where they're like, here's our plan for the next expansion, the one after, and we're going to tease the final shape or whatever. And they talk about things that are changing. They talk about where their priorities are, and they are open in a PR certified way.
It's all scripted.
Which
they've got camera friendly people there while also being the developers, which is better than nothing.
Totally. And like, look, it's like they were deeper dives than like they were doing that for a reason. They were doing a deep dive into reasons why they were doing things, and they were doing that to build up trust and faith in their vision and direction that they were going. And realistically, having a weekly this week at Bungie like post, like that isn't nothing. That's work. You need to be able to show something for that every week. And it allows people to follow along with what they're doing, and it allows them to buy into like the Bungie's decisions.
And they've fostered a great community along the way through their actions in these tasks, like you've described.
Totally. And it's worth pointing out as well that they did these layoffs like a week before the end of the month, and in American like ways of working, which I still can't believe this is the case. In a lot of instances, you get the end of the month's insurance, you get severance, but you get insurance until the end of the month, because in America your insurance is tied to your workplace, which is just the stupidest fucking thing in the world. And so the moment you clock over to the next month after you have the next calendar month after you have been made redundant or let go or fired, you then are no longer insured, and then you don't have health insurance anymore. And so they had days a week of insurance, and that's it.
The 1st of November was last Wednesday.
Yeah, sorry. So days, literally days, which is horrid.
Yeah.
And deliberate, because the companies aren't ignorant. They know that.
And they can choose when to fire people.
Yeah. And they can choose to give them further insurance if they want.
Yeah.
That is a decision that they are able to make. And they didn't. And that sucks.
Yep.
It's don't trust companies, kids.
Yeah, don't trust companies, even the ones you love, because they're just companies, and they will let you down. Firstly, but also like they're not there for you.
Yeah, they're
not there for you. They're not there for the employees. They're there for themselves.
They will fuck you.
Yes,
they will fuck you. Speaking of, let's go to a break and then talk about 62 others.
62 other companies.
Yes.
Right. Yes. No, let's do that. Bit of a jumping off point. So take a sec, everyone. We're gonna do the same, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the MiniMapCast. We had a brief moment of levity in the break there before getting ready to dive right back into our topic for the show today. For our audio listeners, Jeremy's written we've got a little ticker along the bottom of the screen that gives topics of what we're going to be talking about today. And today it says minimap.com.au like it always does. And then the subject line is the death of the games industry.
Yes.
So I guess let's start that topic.
Yeah. So inspired is perhaps a too friendly a word. This what we're talking about here. What I'm bringing to the podcast for the rest of the episode is I wanted to look back at the year a little bit, because there are two narratives that have been sort of put forth when people are thinking about this year in games. It is,
and we have addressed this subject a number of times.
Totally, yeah.
In passing,
yeah. It is, and both of these things can be true, but yes. there are. It's more than just these two things, which is that, in terms of releases, this has been an incredibly strong year in games for the amount of high quality, critically acclaimed, publicly received games that have come out. It has been a really exciting year in the kinds of products that have been released in the games industry. On top of that, it has been an especially poor year for employees of companies that are in a part of the games industry, for game developers around the world. Economically, it's been a very bad year for a lot of industries. However, when we are talking about, people are this will be looked at as one of the best year of games looking back. And that's because when you look at games that you're muted, Kerry.
Oh, I keep doing that. Yeah, much like when we look at 2013 or 1998, it's like, oh, is this one? Is it this one?
Exactly. This will be one of those ones. And that's because when you look at the games that are coming out, you're not going to get the whole story. This should not be a year where people say this was an incredible year for games, because just of the sheer amount of companies that have had redundancies, acquisitions that are, at least in our opinions, are overall bad for the industry, and
a number of acquisitions that have aged to the point now where people are being let go as a result of those acquisitions.
Yes.
A number of years down the line.
Yes. And just for overall corporate greed, like just plain old, just number not high enough, therefore people lose livelihood.
But not me. And the man who makes the decision.
Yes. Yeah. Let me be clear. The people who are unhappy that the number hasn't gone up enough are not the people that are losing their livelihood. They are totally fine, unfortunately. So I want to give just some context. I'm going to run through the year as quick as I can. I've gathered
seatbelts on everybody.
Yeah, I've gathered a tremendous amount of data here. And I'm going to read through it because I feel like the longer this takes, the more this hits. And I think that is important because otherwise it is almost incomprehensible. As I was putting this list together, I was exhausted by it. So we're going to start in November of last year, only because of Meta, Facebook, the company which has a tremendous amount of influence in VR game, like VR development, hardware development, VR games. They purchased a couple of studios over the years, and last year
it's also like 12 months ago. I think that's fair.
Yeah, totally. But that's the only one from last year that I'm talking about, just to give greater context for some of the more recent ones. But yeah, Meta announced last year that they were letting off 21,000 employees over a year. This was by and large due to Zuckerberg's complete failure of his metaverse, his intense investment into building this next phase of humanity, which has just been a complete shambles, incredibly owned up to that, doesn't make it better, fucked up a lot of people's lives by doing this, and is totally fine. So I wanted to begin with that.
21,000 jobs.
Yes. Moving into January, the studio Hidden Leaf Games, which was working on a game called Fangs, had layoffs in January. The amount of employees that were let go from Hidden Leaf was unfortunately unknown. Riot Games in January had layoffs. They are the developers of both League of Legends and Valorant. They let go of 46 people in January.
Okay.
Microsoft announced that across the entirety of Microsoft, not just Xbox, they were laying off 10,000 people in January, We don't know how many of those people were laid off from Bethesda Game Studios and the Coalition. They were hit. They were indeed laid off. And 343 will also experienced layoffs in January of this year. 60 people from 343 were laid off. In February, there was a studio called Wicked Realm Games, which is working on one of the Star Trek games, a game called Star Trek Timelines. It's unknown how many people were laid off there. Take-Two Interactive also experienced layoffs in March of this year. It was mostly due to their publishing departments and some corporate people, but there were, again, layoffs in Take-Two Interactive. Gameloft, who are famous for developing tons of mobile games, a lot of licensed stuff, they let go of 100 employees in March. EA laid off 700 employees in March of this year as well.
My God.
We forgot about. 6% of their entire workforce were laid off. Ready at Dawn and Downpour experienced layoffs in April of this year. They were a part of Meta's eventual gradual layoff of 10,000 employees in 2023. There were alleged reports that potentially 1/3 of Ready at Dawn were affected by these layoffs, which is quite a lot. Nexon, which is one of the biggest companies in Korea, one of the biggest gaming companies that exists. They are a huge company that deal in billions. Presumably 200 employees were laid off then.
Oy. Same studio, or same gigantic corporation behind Dave the Diver, that came out this year.
Inno Games, the developers of Forge of Empires, laid off 75 people in April. In May, Kabam, the studio behind Marvel Contest of Champions, which is a mobile game, laid off 12% of their workforce. The studio that is controlling Gwent under CD Projekt Red laid off 30 employees same month.
As that game was sunset, wasn't it? That was finalized.
I believe so. They were looking towards the end of that game at that point. Sega Sammy, the company that owns Sega, experienced something like a profit drop of I think they lost billions of dollars over a quarter because of part of their investments didn't work out, and also they were also investing in some crypto stuff at this point. I want to say I don't super remember if that lines up 1-to-1. They laid off 121 employees at Relic Entertainment, the company that it works for, the company that makes Company of Heroes and Age of Empires 4.
They're a really passionate team.
Yep.
I mean, so many of these developers are passionate, and it is their dream job. Like that, we shouldn't say that they are more than any others.
No, but sometimes the studio is there's a culture around the game that is coming out that allows excitement to come out of that studio, right?
Yeah.
Deck 9 Games, the studio behind the Life is Strange spin-off, experienced a layoffs of about 30 people same month. Brace Yourself Games, the studio behind Crypt of the Necrodancer, lost half of their staff due to layoffs and redundancies. The Molasses Flood, the CD Projekt Red spin-off studio, which was making Witcher games, laid off 29 people as well.
Okay.
Deviation Studios, a former Call of Duty developer game studio that was PlayStation backed, currently doesn't have any games out, laid off up to 90 of their staff members.
Oh.
We still don't have any we still don't know what games they're working on at the moment. Ubisoft laid off 60 people in May and 6 people in October. They are dealing in the thousands, so that's not a tremendous portion of their workforce, but it's still people.
Still a large number.
Totally. Final Strike Games allegedly had layoffs. This one was maybe the most the only one I couldn't really verify that I've got in here. Allegedly they were working on an unannounced science fiction shooter for Sony. We don't super know much about what's happening there, but allegedly they reduced their staff members by 40%. Play On, previously Coke Interactive, laid off or 6 people. Again, this is quite small in compared to their 2,000 employees. Unity announced layoffs of 600 employees. Again, this is we're still in May. We're still in May, Kerry.
600
employees, 8% of their staff.
I don't even remember this.
Yep.
I feel so bad.
Phoenix Lab, the studio behind Dauntless and Fae Farm. Dauntless, I think, isn't doing so well anymore. I'm not sure. You haven't.
It always did like okay for what it was, but I don't think it ever really kicked off the way they wanted it to.
Yeah. They laid off 9% of their staff. The reason I'm going back and forth in between numbers and percentages is because that's all the information we have, by the way. Number of employees at a studio, number of employees let go. We don't always get the clearest picture, but this is about the most information that we have.
Dauntless was last updated in July.
Right, there we go.
Whereas previously it was getting fortnightly updates, it looks like. Then it quickly went to monthly, and we haven't heard anything since July. That's very sad.
Entering June of this year, Ludia, the studio behind the Jurassic World Alive game, the Pokemon Go West Jurassic World game, laid off up to 55 employees. And then Niantic, the studio behind Pokemon Go, cancelled their NBA game, cancelled their Marvel game, doubled down on Pokemon Go, and laid off between 20 and 25% of their employees.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
How many people do they have?
I'm not sure. Quite a few is my understanding.
Let's see if I can find that.
Scavenger's studio, the studio behind the game I'm not sure if this is out or if it came out. I couldn't keep track of this one. Seasons: A Letter to the Future, that like narrative game about the road trip. Really lovely art style, really, really exciting looking game. In June, they laid off over half of their employees, and there are only 16 employees remaining.
Yep.
The Game Band, the studio behind Blaseball, also had a tremendous amount of layoffs. This is at the same time they shut down Blaseball. They said it was no longer viable for them to keep running. It just wasn't creating the revenue that it once was.
So Niantic in 2021 was estimated to have around 800 employees. So that's kind of out of date. That's far enough away that number could have changed a lot. But still, what did you say? 20%?
20 to 25%.
So 20 to 25% is of 800 is 160 to 200 people.
Sorry, I've misread my numbers. It's 230 people or 25%. Yeah. Continuing June, we have Embracer shuttering Volition in its entirety. Like moments after Saints Row was coming out.
Look up the size of Volition.
Then Fire Monkeys laid off 2/3 of its staff after EA announced that they were doing company-wide redundancies. Fire Monkeys, Melbourne-based studio that is known for Sims Mobile or Sims Free Play, I believe is what it's called. Bonus XP, the studio that was working on the Stranger Things game on mobile for Netflix, like one of those Netflix games, that studio got shut down. High Res Games, the team behind Smite, laid off just under 30 people. Now into July, we have Wild Seed Games, which is a studio that was working on a game called Overack. This game did not come out, and then the studio closed. I think they were working on it for a couple of years.
You know, that makes sense, right? You see that, and it's like, you know, you put the money into the thing, you put that investment, you didn't see that return on investment. That makes sense, but it's still hard. It's still not good.
And they were going for a couple of years as well. Like their game was announced and had, you know, development updates and stuff.
Yeah. I've got a number on Volition from 2021 of 236 employees. That would have been close or in the lead up to Saints Row coming out.
Yeah.
So I imagine their numbers were probably still in that 200 range, and they were all just gone.
Yeah, totally. Into August now, Romino Games, the team behind Awesome Noughts, filed for bankruptcy. East Side Games, a team that was working with AEW, the wrestling franchise. I'm not sure if they worked on that game that just came out or if they're working on an upcoming one. I'm not 100% sure. They laid off 20% of their staff, which is about 30 people. Blackbird Games, the team behind Minecraft Legends, laid off about 40 people. BioWare, making the new Dragon Age game, laid off about 50 people, again in August. Vela Games, the team behind Evercore Heroes, laid off about 50 people. The studio only had about 60 to 65 employees, so they were decimated by layoffs. Imaginary Studio, they are an ex-Blizzard employee startup company that they haven't announced what they're working on yet. Majority of their 54-person staff is what was reported to come out of them. Striking Distance Studios, the team behind the Callisto Protocol that came out this year that did not do very well commercially.
Whose senior leadership team already jumped ship.
Yep. They let off 32 people in August. Double Stallion Games, who were working on Convergence, a League of Legends story. They had layoffs. The number of layoffs that were there was not disclosed. Then coming into September, we've got Creative Assembly, this team behind Total War, but also working on their game called Hyenas. Hyenas was cancelled. This is after Sega had more continuous losses.
That's right.
Redundancies were there enough for them to cancel the game that they were working on. No numbers were stated, unfortunately. Epic Games, the team behind Fortnite and a tremendous amount of other games, laid off 16% of their staff, or 830 employees.
Oh, fucking hell.
And this was similar to when Bandcamp was sort of getting thrown into the shit as well.
Yeah, when they sold them off.
Yeah, and this is all because of Tim Sweeney's failures of investment and failures of leadership. He didn't take a single pay cut, is my understanding. Fall Guys, Mediatonic, the team behind Fall Guys, wrapped up in that. A part of this, because they are owned by Epic, were absolutely decimated.
They were acquired.
They were acquired by Epic, and they were decimated by these layoffs. Blizzard Entertainment, the team behind Diablo, Overwatch, Hearthstone, 10 members of their Hearthstone team were hit. 30 employees at Roblox were let go as well. Crystal Dynamics let go of 10 employees. Beamdog, the team behind Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition, laid off 26 staff. Probably Monsters, which had nothing officially announced at this point, also had layoffs around then as well. Ascendant Studio, the team behind Immortals of Avium, this is still in September. 40 employees were let go off.
That was like weeks after that game was launched.
Yep. Visual Concepts, the team behind Lego 2K Drive, also had layoffs, which would have been quite close to that game's release as well.
Yep.
Gearbox Publishing, following Volition's closing, also had layoffs. Telltale, the team that is working on The Wolf Among Us, had layoffs. They had about 10 people that were laid off according to Polygon sources. Their games are still coming out, as far as we're aware. Keywords laid off the entirety of the Dragon Age Dreadwolf QA team. All 13 members of their QA team were laid off, all of which had unionized and were supporting unions in other countries. Naughty Dog let go of basically all of their contract workers. This is in October by this point.
This is around the time that their Factions game reportedly was put on ice.
Yep. So they didn't let go of any of their full-time employees, but they did let go of all of their contract employees, which means that they didn't have to pay any severance on any of them. Team 17, the publisher, Eurogamer suggested that about 50 employees were laid off between November as they entered a state of consolidation. Also, the CEO of Team 17 had also departed before that as well. CD Projekt Red also announced 100 employees, which is about 9% of their workforce, had been made redundant in October as well. This caused a unionization to happen at CD Projekt Red.
Mm-hmm.
After the release of Gollum, the team at Daedric Entertainment laid off 25 people.
It's Daedalic, isn't it?
Daedalic, yes, sorry, you're right. And then Bungie, as we said in the first half of the show.
There were numbers of we know their QA team got hit really hard at Bungie as part of that, close to 100 people. Yep. We know their community management's gone, but I was also hearing things that it was almost every department. You know, people from art, people from code, people from PR and marketing. Every department was hit from that.
That's Jeremy, a lot of fucking layoffs.
Did you happen to total those numbers?
I couldn't because there was a lot of just percentages, and there was like it was kind of too hard to wrangle that. I didn't have enough information.
No, we were easily in the thousands. I think closer to 2,000 or 3,000.
Oh, I mean,
ones that you've said.
Like Epic had over 800, so like
that's the thing.
Yeah.
And then with Niantic, Volition,
yeah,
Google, Xbox, Bungie now.
Yeah. And like there will probably be more before the end of the year, right? Like there are some companies that we haven't heard from all year, and there are some companies that haven't had the strongest of years. We don't know.
Well, that's the thing. Not everyone's releasing games this year, right?
Totally, right? Yeah, like maybe like a Sucker Punch, for example. We haven't seen them in a minute. Hopefully not. But when you haven't heard from a company in a little while, you do get a little bit concerned. Not that like
Sony Bend as a similar example.
Totally. Especially considering that it was reported that they were put on and then pulled off projects. That is not a great direction to be heading when worrying about layoffs.
Media Molecule had layoffs recently.
Media Molecule also had layoffs. I could only get as many as I could find.
Yeah.
They also did have layoffs. I forgot about them.
And then you also run into the issue, of course, of the people that are releasing games this year are running up against Starfield and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and Super Mario Wonder and Spider-Man 2 and even breakout hits like Baldur's Gate or Dave the Diver or El Paso Elsewhere. Like, it's great that they can break through, but there's so much noise this year.
But here's the thing. I don't think that correlation is 1-to-1 because
like the games that are doing well are speaking for themselves.
Totally. But I think that while there's a lot of noise and the games are struggling to gain perhaps a more standard amount of traction as they might have been able to, because there's been like tentpole-esque releases every month or two, it feels like.
Or sometimes every week.
Totally. There's a larger issue, I think, here, which is like a lot of the companies that experience the largest volume of layoffs are companies that are publicly listed, publicly traded companies.
Yeah.
Like EA, like
Google, Xbox. You said Take-Two. I couldn't believe Take-Two is in there.
They had very few layoffs, comparatively. But like, yeah, Unity, Ubisoft, Embracer, even Microsoft as well. Microsoft's layoffs were also announced 1 year to the day that their intention to purchase Activision Blizzard came around, and that definitely took a lot longer than that expected. Not that they expect, like they did. I don't think they expected to close that within a year, because I think they knew they were getting a fight the moment they announced this. But it definitely hurt them longer than they wanted it to.
Yes.
On top of all of this, there's been adjustments out of COVID. Changing of workplace, people moving around, economy being harder to deal with, cost of living increasing dramatically, rent increasing dramatically. But it's realistically, a lot of it is about growth and greed. Because do you remember a single time this year that the head of a company was like, I'm taking a pay cut?
I don't remember a time. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a time, but in relation to all of these layoffs, there should have been hundreds of times, like, in my opinion.
Like some of the smaller studios, it's hard to know. These are very small studios. I was pulling some of this information from just like ex-employees' LinkedIn posts where they're like, I'm being laid off with 6 others or whatever, right? Those are small employees. Some of them didn't even have, like, some of them weren't even reported on. They were so small. However, a lot of the bigger ones, I didn't hear a single time Tim Sweeney, Phil Spencer, any of the other like big name heads of companies were like, I'm taking a pay cut. I know some of them didn't get bonuses. That's not the same thing.
It is not the same thing, especially when they're being paid more than $500,000 a year or more, millions of dollars a year for some of them.
Yeah.
Like, that's fucked up.
And have equity in the company, have a percentage stake in the company. Because
my God, that was the other thing with Blizzard. Did you hear about the share situation with Blizzard? No, not Blizzard. Bungie. Did you hear about the share situation with Bungie?
No.
The employees, as part of their employment there, they were given unvested shares in the company or something like that. Unvested, I think was the term.
Right.
Which basically meant as soon as they were fired, they no longer had their shares.
Right.
As soon as they were let go, they made that they basically rug pulled the shares. They didn't get any benefit from having those along the way.
But is it that, or is it the moment that clause in their contract kicks in, they get their shares paid out, and they are not allowed to continue to own a stake, or not allowed to continue the stake that they own in the company? That might be more what it is, because like it's not uncommon for a company to say, hey, you can either like get a pay increase or a percentage cut of the company.
Okay, no. So I've got it here. This is so from Paul Tassi. This is sort of a dot point summation from what he's heard from other sources and people that he's spoken to. Many employees had unvested shares as a result of the Sony purchase.
Right. Okay.
These shares would be received based on staying with the company for a certain number of years following the sale.
Right.
But those shares revert to Bungie if you leave, even if you're fired, which is what's happening now to many of those affected.
Yeah. That's not as immediately malicious. However,
it's unfortunate, but it was like
it still once again benefits the company more than employees, which is the reoccurring thing here, right?
It's also another problem to look at when talking about acquisitions.
Totally. A lot of these companies have their priority is to the executives who own and can make decisions inside of the companies, managerial positions as well, and then to their share and stockholders. They will always take care of them before they take care of their employees. And so that offset allows the company to stay at the amount that they were worth, while then having to like basically offset money that they would lose by letting go of an employee, removing overhead costs on their employees. And it is always the most short-sighted thing that happens. And when this happens, every time the employee will always get fucked by this. They will always get fucked by this. There are so few things an employee can do to try and prevent this from happening. Obviously unionization is the first step to all of this, but this is like, as an industry, incredibly unsustainable, right? This was almost every major company in the entire industry was hit by this or did this. One of the few exceptions, right, is Nintendo. And while I am not going to accept Doug Bowser's word that the reason there aren't unions inside of Nintendo is because everybody feels like they're taken care of.
They don't need them.
Yeah, right? Yeah, because that's not the point. And I said this last week. But the thing is, Nintendo has something like a low 90% retention rate of their employees. They have
absolutely astronomical.
That is more than almost any company I've ever heard of. And it's because, for the most part, they take care of their employees. The employee satisfaction at Nintendo is incredibly high. When you take care of your employees, you have people that want to stay there for over 20 years. Some of them have been there since the NES, right? Mm-hmm. Not just Miyamoto. Like, I'm talking people that are not quite his high level, but have since grown inside of the company to higher and higher levels. what that also allows you to do is when you are making games, when you're making properties and working on properties that have been going on for that long, you have a through line of people that understand that property and can continuously make games that work on that, like work in that area that people adore, right? We spoke about this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about Mario Wonder. No other studio has that. They simply don't. And if they do, it's studios of like 4 or 5 people. There are studios that have high satisfaction rates, but it's not that high. This is like how the industry dies. This is why I called this topic the death of the games industry, because if everybody is so focused on this level of growth, this will continually happen. This is going to happen forever. And then suddenly there's not going to be enough employees who are working on projects enough. People are going to like start selling off their studios. Everything's going to be dramatically consolidated into fewer and fewer studios. And then there's going to be 5 or 6 major companies that are going to own all of the smaller companies. And then the moment that happens and one major company fucks up, all the small studios get hit and they all get laid off. Further reading, see the fall of the Australian games industry 15 years ago. That is exactly what happened. There was like an intense amount of consolidation under the Australian games industry when they decided to leave because the Australian game industry was too expensive for them. They shuttered all those studios and decimated the industry. It'll happen worldwide. There's no bubble that's too big to pop.
No, you're right. And it's the thing with capitalism, right? You can't have that growth infinitely because it doesn't work like that within our economy.
No.
So naturally there comes a point where we have to, after the rise, there comes the fall. And it affects people every time. And increasingly, I would say, it affects the small people because a lot of the people at the top of these companies are making more money than they ever have before. And then, like as we've said, as we've alluded to, they're not giving that wealth up to help support their studios in terms of distributing that money to other developers to make sure they can keep more people on or whatever. It is a problem. If I had to look at this situation, I would say we're looking at the shrinking of the games industry. I don't think we're going to get to the point where it goes away entirely. It's not going to die, in my opinion.
No, like video games won't disappear in the same way that like film won't disappear or music won't disappear.
Exactly. But, or books.
Yeah, but like the industry can collapse. Like, you know, there can be like the industry has collapsed before. We've had the fall of the games industry before. And it took a long time and it took a lot of money and for it to actually come out the way that it was. Yeah. Right? Like, you know, the lead up to the ET video game is when that first happened, right? And that was there was a lot of things at stake there, but
people were greedy and bullish on what were promising prospects at the start of when Nintendo, like when Mario hit store shelves or whatever. Yeah, and people paid the price for that. You're right. And it will change the industry is the thing. These problems will grow to define the industry. And I think what we're looking at in the future, I think, is a massive, like the industry's pulling so hard towards service games in a really weird, late way. You know what I mean? Like, as we've already spoken, because we were already talking about Destiny, this episode, like Destiny 1 came out more than 9 years ago now. And, you know, sort of redefined what like an MMO is and what like a service, or kind of actually just defined what a service game is.
Yeah, but between I just want to include, it was them and it was like Warframe, I want to say. Those were the two that hit at almost the same point.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like people have been, and you know, and we've had smaller things in the middle there and then things that popped up out of nowhere like Fortnite or Rocket League or, you know, PUBG and all kinds of stuff. And people try so hard to create this next biggest thing and are pointing at games like Destiny and games like Fortnite being like, we need that now, not understanding or not caring
that what they're pointing at is lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden there's dozens of these gigantic companies pouring billions of dollars into this thing that's actually quite hard to nail down in an industry that is becoming increasingly fatigued with that business model and that game service plan, that strategy, those sets of mechanics and those monetization strategies, where the well is drying up in that area well before all these companies can stake their claim.
Yeah.
And it is what we are looking at here. We're seeing it with Bungie, literally. Like this is their wheelhouse, and they are losing money here by the hundreds of millions by the sounds of it. Like, it's going to be fascinating to see whether either everyone pulls off the service model to figure it out, where that becomes the only thing that this industry becomes. But what I think is more likely is going to happen is, like, there will be people will realize that it takes far too much investment and far too much money, far too much time to pull off in a way that guarantees a return, that people will start like really backing off on it and be less bullish on this idea. But the thing is, for that to happen, these companies are going to have to be burned hard for them to learn their lesson.
So I think part of that is happening this year, because I think we are seeing the beginning of the shift away from the live service model. And I think
but at the same time, we're looking at Sony like tripling and quadrupling down. You know, we've got Fair Games and Concord, Marathon. They're even just their investment in Bungie in the first place. All of it is looking shaky. The Last of Us factions is another example. Like, all of it's on shaky ground, and it's so much of what their future looks like. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. Like, it's a good point, because like they are doubling down on it over there. But I think like a studio like the most recent Assassin's Creed game, for example, is the least live servicey that it's ever been. Well, basically since before it was a live service game, because it turns out single player games shouldn't be live service games. Stuff like Gotham Knights not doing well almost at all. Avengers shuttering all but, and Redfall.
Suicide Squad coming next year. That'll be its own teachable moment. Yeah, Redfall.
I think Suicide Squad is in an awkward spot where it's been in development for too long, where they've unfortunately committed to that horse, and it's too late to change.
But it's that thing of like, we all sit there and wonder, why did they make this game?
Totally, of course. And a lot of it is because, like, almost so the way capitalism works, right, is you've got the people at the top who have a certain amount of capital, and you've got the workers below them that are making the money for the people who are owning the capital, and the workers don't actually own that. But then what happens is, when there's not enough capital going to the people who own the capital, the capitalists, right, then they cut down the wages of the workers to increase the amount of capital that goes up to the capitalists. But they realize that they need a certain amount of workers to make the thing. So this is where do you know the meme about like Marx could have never foreseen XYZ? It's a very funny thing where like you bring up the latest like capitalist obsession and be like, if Marx is so smart, how come he didn't consider NFTs or whatever? And it's a very tongue-in-cheek thing, but it's always like he could have never foreseen how bad it got.
Yeah.
Marx could have never considered the games as a service model, for example,
Sure,
where suddenly you have fewer people making more of the game over a longer period of time, and the capital continuously comes in, not to the workers, but to the bourgeoisie at the top. That is the, like, crypto shit and AI shit aside, one of the most wild things that capitalists have ever invented. That is like the greatest trick that they ever pulled was getting you to pay for the same thing over and over again. Otherwise you can't use it. I was reminiscing the other day about in the days of Adobe, when you could just buy it and you owned a fucking Adobe product.
Yeah, totally.
You can't do that anymore. Now they get you every month, regardless of if you use it or not.
Yeah.
And so they've allowed themselves to get to the point where they can peter out on having the fewest amount of people working on a thing, and it having make more money than it ever has before. which is fucking nuts.
Yeah, it's gross.
And it will.
It was gross when it was happening, but Adobe fostered such a dependence on their software by making some of the best software out there, and then they decided to chump change everyone.
And like it didn't start with Adobe. Like it probably one of the earliest adopters is probably like Netflix, right? Which disrupted that entire industry and now have petered out the other way, where they've literally run out of consumers to market to.
Yeah.
You know about this, how they've hit the maximum amount of people they're probably ever going to get, because their adoption rate slowed to the point where they're like, we've actually got everybody.
Yeah, they kind of saturated the market. Yeah.
And that's why they're having to just gouge everybody that continuously is already their customer and hope that they just don't teeter that over.
Yeah.
Like it's not just fucked in games.
Balance.
Yeah. It's not just fucked in games. It's fucked everywhere.
No.
But man, is it also fucked in games.
Yes, 100%. It's a weird time. Like, I don't know. I look at the big companies like Xbox, and we've heard a lot from Xbox this year because of the Activision Blizzard acquisition.
Yeah. We know what they're doing for the next 5 years. 10 years.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah, we had that gigantic leak from them.
Yeah.
We've heard a lot from them in this last 12 months. And honestly, I don't know what we have to show for Xbox right now. For all of their investments, for all of their, for the gamers mentality and talks, and for their new service model of Game Pass and their subscription service. It's like, what do we really get from Xbox right now? What we get from them is acquisitions. That's what we get the most from them. That's what they are most reliable for now. It's not a Microsoft Game Studios game has released, I can't wait to play it. It's, let's see if this one is good or not. Like it's a complete crapshoot, because it seems to me that Xbox's motivations aren't high quality games. It's market domination funded by a very wealthy company in the tech industry.
I think that's maybe a little bit harsh in the sense that there are still high quality games that are coming out from them.
Yes, that is fair, and I agree that me summarizing that way was probably a bit harsh. But I'm just trying to looking at the results and their actions and trying to piece together their motivations. I do not see them as a positive force in the industry right now.
Well, no, because I don't think that there is a positive force in the industry. Like every single dominant force in the industry is a conglomerate corporation that is negative overall. Like I can't point to a single force that is a large company and go, oh yeah, no, that one.
I think negative overall is, I think that's paradoxical in nature, because if it was negative overall, then there wouldn't be an industry, right? Like Nintendo was a big company when they started, and they can't have been a negative force in the industry overall this whole time, because then the industry wouldn't exist.
But I mean, right now, looking at them right now, being like, none of these companies are like, Nintendo's maybe the most, and even then, they really love to fuck up a lot of other things anyway.
Yeah.
That
100%.
At the very least, they seem to be taking care of their employees, and they are putting out high quality games that are like just really good, right? That's not the barometer, but like they're doing both, and they're doing some work for that. You can't backseat yourself to a 90% employee retention rate.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that is worthwhile looking at. And you look at Xbox, then we look at someone like Sony, who more recently we're looking at things like all of the weird decisions they've made in the last 18 to 24 months with how they've raised their prices on their subscription service and how long it took for them to implement it and how half-assed it is. We've got their random decisions about like how much their peripherals cost, like the DualSense Edge and the PlayStation Portal. Things like the PlayStation Slim not coming with a vertical stand anymore.
And like the only reason that we don't put them in the same conversation of Xbox when it comes to their like live service model stuff is because their live service model is just really poor. Like,
it just doesn't compete.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that if it competed, it would be better overall for like the industry, but what I mean is that like it's just not really a competitor. Like
that's it, isn't it?
like they're not doing the same things. They're charging equivalent prices, and it doesn't ever feel like it's really worth it in the end.
Yeah. And then we run into the interesting situation of, you know, you were talking about, and this isn't necessarily like a malevolent issue, but, you know, we're looking at indie developers now who are 10 plus years past the big indie boom of the Xbox Live Arcade era with Super Meat Boy and Limbo and everything that, and Fez and everything that went from then on. You know, we're looking at the studio behind Crypt of the Necrodancer. They had to let go of half their studio. Like it's amazing that they were able to grow to that size, and the train has run for so long now that we've seen the effects of what happens when they can't roll out another game after they get to that size. And unfortunately, the effect is they've had to let people go, and it's just so hard to see what the positive way forward is through all this, because at the same time as all of these companies are shrinking, it also means that there's going to be less support for indies going out on a limb. You know, maybe El Paso Elsewhere doesn't get made in 2024 because maybe their publisher can't afford to jump on the bandwagon and help them out next year after there's a bit more shrinkage in the industry and a bit more shrinkage of capital.
Well, like, I think
thank goodness it could come out this year, but like, you know, what is that knock-on effect on the smaller developers too?
Well, like, I think there are a lot more indie publishers that are at least taking care of their own in a better way. You know, like folks like Devolver, folks like Humble Publishing. Like we know Team 17 got hit in these layoffs, but I think they're not necessarily like a bad place to go. That like I think there is room for those studios to find a publisher and find money and then be able to publish in a way that doesn't feel like they need to appease a tremendous amount of overlords.
Yes,
which I think is good. And there are some spots in the industry that are like good places to be, right? Like I've not heard a single negative thing about Supergiant, for example. You know, like, and I'm not saying that there aren't negative things there. We haven't heard it, right? Things seem all right over there.
I know we mentioned them in the layoffs, but I think of Media Molecule too as a very positive place to work.
Yeah, like as a workplace, definitely,
and a creative place as well.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see what they become now. Because
they've been experimenting with Dreams for like 9 years and it didn't go so well, and they've hit layoffs and they're still under Sony. So that's a complicated situation to bring up. But yes.
Whereas like any place that does profit sharing, does like, you know, co-op workspaces, all of that stuff, that is like, it's not, again, the most stable because you need to continuously release games that are making you money, but you will be treated better there overall than you will at one of these companies that is just going to look at you as a figure to hopefully make the shareholders happy. It's just it's a bad time at the moment. Mm-hmm. There are still exciting things that are coming out of like a lot of these AAA spaces, you know, like the reception overall from Insomniac games has been good and positive. You know, games like Pentiment coming out of Xbox is like a good thing. That's a game that Obsidian just wanted to make and they're allowed to make it. The thing that is so unfortunate, I think, about this industry is that like, so Killers of the Flower Moon just came out.
Right. Scorsese's
next. His latest 4-hour film has just released. It's kind of not a joke. I think it's like 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
Like he's had this thing recently. It's like it's been overblown because nerds on the internet are upset when the thing that they like gets at all criticized. But like his thing about Marvel movies is that, you know, they're theme park rides and all that stuff. But what he's talking about a lot of the time is he's talking about cinema space. Because what Disney does, and let's be real, Microsoft, PlayStation, Epic, they're looking at Disney being like, we want to be like them. What Disney does is they force cinemas, chain or independent, to say, hey, if you want to show the next Captain America movie,
which of course you do, because they're some of the only things that people are turning up for.
Yeah, because of course you do, because it will make you a ton of money. You need to give this a certain amount of screenings, a certain amount of months, regardless of if people buy the tickets or not. You need to give this time that's in your contract. Otherwise, we're not going to give them to you. If you then decide and you turn around and you say, it's not making us any money, we want to stop showing this, we'll take you to court or you won't get the next one. One of the two, you'll hate both.
Fucking hell.
What that means is then films like Killers of the Flower Moon or another Scorsese joint comes out, their window in cinemas is now shrunk. And so then what that tells the dumbasses in the studio is that, hey, people aren't going to see any films that aren't Marvel movies. What that does is eliminates the ability of word of mouth of a film to gain an audience, a new film that people don't know about, that haven't heard of, from a director that maybe no one's heard of before, or maybe a director that they have heard of before, but it's just not a licensed IP. It's not a thing that you know about going into the movie, suddenly can't gain traction. The way, and like, I'm not saying that Apple are good in any sense of the word. Apple have bankrolled Killers of the Flower Moon as a piece of media that exists. They're not going to make their budget back on that. It's not going to make Marvel money. It'll probably make money. It's not going to make Marvel money. It's not going to make Star Wars money. They're not making prop franchise money, and they know that. But they at least put it together because sometimes you can pay for something just because you want it to exist, right? Yeah. Where does that exist in the games industry?
I mean, I think it does happen, but it's hard with...
It doesn't come from the top, right? It doesn't come from the top dogs, and it doesn't come from the ones that can afford to just do that all the time, right? It happens occasionally. Like Pentiment, I think, is a good example of that. Dreams, I think, is another example of that, where they're like, you've got a runway, you've got a budget, make something cool, see what changes, see what works. Whereas now they're like waiting for a small team to make a thing. Let's buy them up. Let's get them cheap. Let's hopefully build it up. Hopefully it works. If it doesn't, we'll kill it. Doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, let's buy them up, and then hopefully their return on investment is 10x or whatever, something ridiculous.
Yeah, something like a Minecraft is a good example of that working out for them, right? Them looking at that going like, let's try and do a thing and see if it works. Whereas,
yeah, totally.
Sometimes it just becomes consolidation, right? Sometimes it's just like you can do that for like Epic goes out and buys the team making Fall Guys, which is, I think, another good example of this, where they're like, hey, this thing really worked. We didn't make this thing, but you made this thing. Let's buy this thing, give you a bit of money. Oh, we're not doing so well this year. You got it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Totally. It's like the promise of support, but it then also becomes the promise of the guillotine, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a little different with games and movies when we think about like how cheap can you run to start a project as a game studio? Like games take more hours to make at an independent level than movies do, and subsequently because of that they take less cash. And not necessarily, I'm sure there are films that take more time or more money to make than an independent game. But as a whole, on average, games are more difficult, I would say, to make, require more personnel, and a higher budget because of that to make at an independent level. And so because of that, it's even harder to get something up off the ground unless you've got venture capital, or you've got some sort of sponsorship from a publisher or maybe even some other brand or an investor or something like that. And then all of a sudden you're on the hook.
Or it's Kickstarter, or it's Patreon, or it's me and my buddy.
Mortgages being...
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Or it's my buddy and I worked for 6 years as a second job, put a lien on our homes, and then it paid off, or it didn't.
Yeah, to the point where we hopefully broke even.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's so dicey. It's such a risky industry. I mean, And that's what these companies are betting on, right? And that's why it's going so badly, because a number of these bets aren't paying off. This live service thing, a key example.
And like a lot of the, like, you know, Microsoft's its own weird thing because they have different metrics for profits and all that stuff, and it's way harder to read there. But like you look at a game,
so big,
but you look at like PlayStation, which is still huge, but every one of their games needs to get megabucks. It needs to make it needs to make it back. It needs to make the entire marketing budget back, which is sometimes half of the cost of the game, and it needs to then make some on top of that as well. You know, that is
it's
why.
Funny, right? Because PlayStation is keeping Sony afloat, whereas like Xbox, while it's not as big in the industry, is part of a much, much, much larger company with Microsoft compared to Sony.
Kind of. I mean, Sony have a lot of hands. Like they've got cameras and they've got all their music stuff, and they've also got Sony Pictures, and they've also got TVs. Like it's Sony's still big.
I just know that the sentiment around a lot of those products is that they have not been doing anywhere near as well as PlayStation has been doing for Sony by comparison.
I think that's true, but I think the thing is that like PlayStation is so much more riskier, right? Like it is like because Days Gone made money back, definitely made a profit. Like not a success in Sony's eyes. That's not enough.
Yeah,
you're
like
not...
they're spending Marvel Studios amounts of money on these titles. Like we know that from the court cases. Like, what was it, 220 million for Horizon and for Last of Us over like 5 years each of them. Yeah, like you're right. That's a huge risk.
Yeah, and when it doesn't pay off, like everybody there is going to feel that pain because it's not going to. It doesn't get localized, it doesn't get centralized, and it doesn't say like, hey, everybody, like, you know, CEO should have decided, or CEO should have known that this was not going to pan out. We're going to hang it on them first and then go from there. Like, that's not how that works.
Yeah. Sam makes an interesting question in the live chat on Twitch. Do you think the industry might actually continue to grow, at least in audience size, as millennials and younger people age, or the younger audience age and grow into the audience for games, I guess? I don't think so, because the thing that's hooking younger audience is not the same things that was hooking us when we were younger, you know, like PS2s and Ratchet and Clank. Like that was what grabbed me when I was growing up, and Zelda. And I don't think that the industry is more established since then, and it's not quite the cool thing that's coming up like it was 20 years ago. So I think for it to penetrate the market, I mean, and they did do that a bit with Fortnite. You know, Fortnite really, and Minecraft and Fortnite really ingratiated themselves into the youth of that generation or that time period at the time.
And Roblox is that for the current one.
Yes and no. I mean, Roblox has been around for so long. I don't know how much it. I have no idea. It's such a blind spot for me, honestly. So I'll just say I don't know. Yeah, but I don't think we're seeing the same amount of growth like that, like we were getting maybe 20 years ago. I mean, that said, people, you know, hand a 7-year-old a Switch, and I'm sure they're going to love it.
Yeah, I think Roblox is that actually just for the younger generation. We just don't hear about it. Like, it's like
we're out of touch.
But it's it's a different audience, right? Like I've got a stat here that says 67% of users are under the age of 16. Right.
Yeah, wow, that's huge.
It's got 5.7.
Oh, for Roblox, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's got 5.7 million concurrent users.
Whoa.
Yeah, like it's big.
Yeah, shit.
It's megabucks.
Yeah. And you know, they do have more tech literacy, and then it becomes that thing of, you know, what is a gamer, you know, because, you know, the audience that we think about when we think of like gaming audiences is people who buy a console, you know. But for a long time, the definition of what a gamer is someone who installs an app that is a game on a phone.
Yep.
You know, and then you're a gamer in like some in the market size. So the appeal is broadening. I don't know that the audience for, say, Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo, with these gigantic like 9-figure bets that they're making with their AAA, quadruple A games, I don't know that the audience for those products is going to get especially large or appreciably large very quickly anytime soon.
I don't know if I agree. Only because I think it's just, you know, like, while, yeah, like, you know, like audiences different, and like, you know, there is maybe an appreciation for fewer games than when we were kids. I think that those larger games are the things that we're talking about when we're talking about, you know, Marvel movies being the only thing that exists to most people, right? You know, like I will go out and watch like independent movies, but like most people won't. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but they still exist for people like you or I who are like, you know, trying to keep our fingers on every pulse in this industry. But general audience is like, hey, like I know Fortnite, I know Roblox. Grandma buys me Roblox cards.
Yeah.
That's like a thing that exists.
Or like NBA, EAFC.
All the sports games, right? You know, like that's another thing. And so there's no, I think that's where that like cultural hegemony will begin, like has begun to exist, is that fewer games having more and more people and more ways to continuously connect with that thing, right? That was the Fortnite business model, was like come back every other week and there's a different licensed property that gets thrown into the middle of our game and it'll disrupt everything. And next week it's Dragon Ball and next week it's Star Wars. And what if we've got our cultural hegemonies in our cultural hegemonies, right? You know, you can just start to consolidate all of that stuff to the point where it's not even about games anymore. You know, while I will forever disagree with him, Tim Sweeney continuously say Fortnite isn't just a video game. Or rather, he's saying it's not a video game. It's saying it's a place to hang out, and that is true. But I disagree with his point of question on it.
The claim that it's not a video game is incorrect. It's a video game where you can hang out.
Yes, totally. So like, I think that like that is important again. That I think there are just fewer games that more people are getting involved in.
Yeah.
And it's you and I complaining about YouTube, right? It's fewer channels that more people are watching than ever. It's fewer movie studios that more people are watching those movies from, because all anyone goes to the cinemas, like you said, is to go see Marvel movies. Why else would you go? There's like, they are the bigger ones because that's all people can see. Because the people behind it are forcing you to only see these ones. It will only get worse. You have to actively fight against it to do it. It's why it's so hard to find fucking new bands sometimes. The same thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's so hard for creatives to work in these industries when it requires you to become so profitable and to work within these capitalistic societies, because the teams with the passion aren't doing it for the pay. But then they have to, because it's so expensive to make what they want to. It's a really tricky balance, and it's not a new one, as you said. It's not like it hasn't been a part of music and of films and of authors for decades.
But you can see you're like sitting at the edge of the slide, right? Like that's where we are at the moment, and you can see the bottom, and what's down there is way fucking worse.
Yeah, I don't think it's the death of the industry. Again, I just want to reiterate that, but it will redefine if there is something of a burst bubble effect that happens as a result of all of these declining scenarios, and a number of if things continue to go this way and bets continue to not pay off, the industry, I think, will be able to be reborn. It has done so, and it will continue to do so, but it will look substantially different in a way that I don't think we can really comprehend yet. I'm sure we could guess, but like it's the lessons that the gigantic companies learn, and the lessons that the people offering free game engine software for indies to use learn, Unity, like who knows what the conclusion of these failed bets is that these companies draw.
But but you also, like, I don't think it'll like burst one day. I don't think that happens.
No, but what I mean with like a burst though is like we had like a tech burst, but you know, phone usage is as big as it's ever been. You know, there was a massive internet bubble burst in 1990 fucking whatever.
Sure.
But like, you know, that didn't stop the tech industry from rebounding.
No. But the structures that are in place to protect to protect the system from allowing itself to not be the only thing left, I think are stronger than they have ever been, right? It's like, it's, you know, Disney will never disappear. They are not a company that ever disappears. The independent film scene can disappear. You know, A24 can be the only one that exists, and then they can get shuttered because they're the only one that exists because, you know, Disney have bullied every other studio, or bought every other studio.
Yeah.
Into making sure that the theaters are only playing Disney movies no matter what. You know, they can just start releasing their own theaters. You know, it's the slow death is not the death of like the industry as a whole, but it is unable to get away from the center point of like money and power, right?
Totally.
Like, can you imagine starting up a online store that like sells goods, right? No, Amazon will just absolutely decimate you or buy you, right? Like it just like that is just the way that works. You can't start up another bank. You can't start up another
supermarket.
Yeah, like there are just fewer and fewer of those companies that exist, and sure, they won't, like, you know, supermarkets won't go away. People still need to buy produce. People still need to buy stuff you buy at a supermarket, but there will only be one, and that is the death of the industry.
In a sense. Like, I don't think we'll stop playing. I don't think games will stop releasing, but it's the death of like the creativity of the life, the joie de vivre of the industry. Well, I would say
it'll be like the big three studios, and that'll be it at some point.
I mean, I think Microsoft wants to kill PlayStation. I don't think they want to have competition.
Well, no, but I mean,
like if we still got the big three, that will even be something.
Eventually, it'll become the big one, right? Like that's where the death of that is, right? It's the culmination of Microsoft, Nintendo, and PlayStation. It's the culmination of Disney / 20th Century Fox owning
like Warner Brothers,
Universal, and Warner Brothers, and HBO, and Netflix, and all that stuff. It's Amazon's basically already done it. The only other competitor they've got is Wish, and that's because they can't compete with, you know, like the dramatic, like decreased cost of everything that happens over in China.
Yeah.
It happens everywhere. It will.
And you're right. It's kind of happening at the same time in a lot of these industries at once.
It's happening,
you know, like,
all at once.
Like looking at Marvel, you know, we've got this effect of like, you know, riding so high after Endgame and things being so rocky ever since, where faith is really shaken and we don't know what's going to happen next. And there's a bit of a like, ooh. And I feel like we're looking at that with this shrinking that's happening in the games industry, which feels a bit like a response to everyone increasing game spending over the course of COVID and then studios getting bullish. Like, I wonder if this is the shrinking that was happening after all of that growth that we saw in 2020 and 2021 in this industry specifically.
I think that this was actually due then, but then something happened. We had COVID, and suddenly the industry was able to adapt in a different way. That
artificial bump.
Well, yeah, it was like there was a speed bump that was suddenly in the road that everybody had to like slow down, right? Because in a version of the world where COVID didn't happen, you know, we had the current generation of consoles like probably a year and a half prior. You know, we had a different Nintendo Switch already. You know, everything looks very, very different, but the speed bump, weirdly enough, slowed down that capitalist hellscape that we're still hurtling towards.
Yeah.
And now everyone is just playing catch up.
Yeah, totally.
It was always going to happen. It just got delayed a bit as COVID.
Yeah, totally.
COVID delayed everything, including capitalism.
Yes.
Which is fucking wild.
It is. I mean, all of these things that we're talking about, economies and sorts of ways of running our society, you know, they're all social constructs run by people, right? And people were hit with a fucking existential crisis in a pandemic. So I'm not surprised it all slowed down. It all kind of had to, you know. All of the higher priority of needs started coming first before all of our other bullshit that we put our time into outside of that when it's all sorted.
Join your union, start a union, Go to your local union meetings.
Mm.
Talk to people. Meet people.
I don't know, Jeremy. That sounds like a lot.
Don't give up.
Talk to people, meet people. Ugh.
Oh, it's so good though. Hey, it's me. I just wanted to jump in here really quick just to cite the sources from the different articles of all of those layoff news posts because I think it's important because there was a lot of good writing, especially from places from like GameIndustry.biz and Game Informer and Kotaku and Polygon and IGN. So I just want to shout out all of these publications for actually recording a lot of this information. So those were Polygon, GamesIndustry.biz, Kotaku, Reuters, Eurogamer, Video Game Chronicle, PC Gamer, GeekWire, Game Developer, VentureBeat, Pocket Gamer, The Verge, The Irish Examiner, Game Rant, Game Informer, LinkedIn, MobileGamer.biz, Variety, TechCrunch, IGN, Game World Observer, CNBC, The Korea Times, and Xbox Era.
Well, everyone, I'm not sure what the conclusion from that is, if there is one.
Join your union. That's the conclusion. Join your union.
Oh yes, that's what Jeremy's laying it out for us right now. Yes, sorry, I'm not taking that away because I think every time I think of that, I'm like, oh, I'm freelance, so I don't know. Am I media? Am I written? Am I read? And I just don't do anything. So that was my denial coming to the surface there. Sorry about that. We're gonna wrap it up there, folks. That's it for this week. Who the fuck knows what we'll talk about next week? Like we've been kicking this can down the road of like putting the actors from Breaking Bad into games and what do we think of that? And that's just, we have pushed that by 1 week for the last like 8 weeks. So who knows what we'll be talking about next week? We didn't know we'd be talking about this 7 days ago, and yet here we are. So whatever we're talking about next week, I hope you join us. Be sure to join us when we're back for the MiniMapCast. If you want to stay across our socials and when we're posting new things and going live, you can follow all of our social accounts at MiniMapAU. You can also follow us on Blue Sky under minimap.com.au, which is the same as our website, minimap.com.au. Hey, you can head to minimap.com.au for absolutely everything else Minimap related, like our other podcasts, like our Game Club and our Pop Culture Kissability Ranking podcast that's there. Our latest articles, like my Ghost Runner 2 review or our PAX previews, are all up on the site. Speaking of social media, you could follow us all individually. Jeremy, where can they follow you on the things?
At Obi-Wan or jeremy.minimap.com.au on Blue Sky.
You could follow me at KJPalmer_24 on Twitter, or without the _24 on Blue Sky. For those of you that are live with us on Twitch, hanging out in the chat, feel free to stick around. We're about to start the post show. If you're listening later, please make sure to give the show a positive rating wherever you're listening to us. Those so tasty 5-star ratings. It helps us out a lot in search ratings and algorithms and all of that nonsense that we work within. If you're free next Monday night and you want to join us in chat for the live show, we'd be happy to have you. Lastly, you can support us on Patreon if you want to help keep the mics and lights on. You can do that by heading over to patreon.com/minimapau. And for $5 Australian dues, you'll get 24 hours of early access for all episodes of the MiniMapCast, as well as more benefits, all while helping us out greatly. That'll do it for this week. Stay safe, everyone. I hope next week we come in with more pleasant news. And until then, happy gaming.
Happy gaming. Just before we go, I know what we're going to talk about next week.
Oh my God, what is it?
Epic versus
Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. No,
Epic versus Google's antitrust trial begins today. So catch us next week. Talk about that. Anyway, we'll see you next week when we want to talk about Epic and Google
more court drama.
Taking each other to court.